Hello and welcome to this short presentation on 10 Tudor Queens, the powers behind the throne. I'm Nicholas Henderson and I'm an accredited lecturer both for online Zoom presentations and in person at your meetings. From 1485, when at the Battle of Bosworth Henry VII became the first Tudor monarch, to 1603 and the death of Elizabeth I, the Tudor dynasty dominated the 16th century and all the tumultuous changes that took place, many of which are still with us to this day. But it is to the 10 Tudor queens that we must turn for the power and influence behind the throne. Many of you will think of the 6 wives of Henry VIII, but there were more queens than that. And these I consider in a series of 4 talks or lectures, which can be given individually or together as a study day. And in them you'll be informed, educated, amused, and indeed surprised at what you learn. So let me now run through the 10 and offer a few comments on the way. Ten Tudor Queens, regnant and consort. A short presentation. Elizabeth of York, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, Catherine Parr, Lady Jane Grey, Mary the First, and Elizabeth the First. Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville, she had a claim to the English throne in her own right. She married Henry VII in 1486 after his victory at the Battle of Bosworth, which marked the beginning of the Tudor dynasty. Together, Henry and Elizabeth had 7, possibly 8 children. Sadly, she died after the birth of her last. Her death shattered Henry VII, who never really recovered. She is, of course, the likeness of the original Queen of Hearts, which you can find on the deck of cards. Margaret Beaufort, Henry VII's mother, was her mother-in-law from hell. Catherine of Aragon, the first of Henry VIII's wives, originally Henry VIII's brother Arthur's wife. Even her enemy Thomas Cromwell said of her, if not for her sex, she could have defied all the heroes of history. She was beloved by Henry VIII at first, and his wife for 24 years. Her crime was to have borne only one living child, a daughter Mary, and perhaps to have grown old as well. She never accepted Henry's desire for a divorce, and she remained immensely popular with the people and fought him on what became known as the Great Matter until her death, when she was buried in what was then Peterborough Abbey, now Peterborough Cathedral. Anne Boleyn, the most important of Henry's wives. She was a powerful religious and political figure, sophisticated and educated in the French court. She captured men's hearts. Henry's desire to marry her precipitated the break with Rome and the beginnings of the English Reformation. She was executed on trumped-up charges of treason and incest by beheading. Her surviving child, Elizabeth, would go on to become one of England's greatest monarchs. This is thought to be perhaps how she really looked. Her ghost is said to haunt the Tower of London to this day. Jane Seymour, Henry's third wife. As Queen Consort, she was never crowned. She died of postnatal complications less than 2 weeks after the birth of her only child, a son who was to become Edward VI. She's buried beside Henry in St. George's Chapel in Windsor. Significantly, her marriage brought her 2 brothers, Edward and Thomas Seymour, into political power. Edward will later become Lord Protector during the minority of Edward VI. Both will be beheaded during the power struggles of the Regency. Anne of Cleves, born in Dusseldorf, Duchy of Berg, Anne was a political match engineered by Thomas Cromwell, Henry's powerful chief of staff. She was rejected by Henry, who took a dislike to her, not least after a disastrous wedding night. She then became the king's beloved sister, after being offered and accepting a very generous settlement, including Hever Castle, the Boleyns' old home, and numerous properties, some of which still exist, like Anne of Cleves' house in Lewes, East Sussex. On the bride's side, she outlived all the other wives and settled happily in her new role as the beloved sister, becoming much loved by the people. She died in the reign of Mary I and was buried in Westminster Abbey. On the downside, Thomas Cromwell was executed, at least in part, for his role in arranging the marriage. Wife number 5, Catherine Howard, was one of Anne of Cleves' ladies-in-waiting. She was the first cousin of Anne Boleyn, the first cousin once removed of Lady Elizabeth, later Elizabeth I. She was also the second cousin of Jane Seymour. Henry liked to keep things in the family. He was besotted with her, but unfortunately she came with a past, including a pre-contract marriage of sorts to a Thomas Culpeper, one of Henry's favourites. In November 1541, Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, broke the news to Henry of Catherine's adultery with Culpeper. She was arrested, and the Archbishop told to interrogate her. He reported, "I found her in such lamentation and heaviness as I never saw no creature, so that it would have pitied any man's heart to have looked upon her." She was found guilty by act of attainder, based not least on an incriminating love letter that she had written to Culpeper. She was beheaded on the 13th of April, 1542. According to almost certainly imagined popular folklore, her last words were, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of Culpeper." Culpeper himself was hanged, drawn and quartered. It is said that Catherine's screaming ghost still haunts the gallery in Hampton Court. And here is wife number 6, Catherine Parr. After Henry's death, she would go on to marry the love of her life, the rascal brother of Jane Seymour, Thomas Seymour. He was her 4th husband, and Henry was her 3rd. At his home in Sudley Castle, she helped to tutor the young Lady Jane Grey and the future Elizabeth I, until, that is, Thomas Seymour dallied with the teenage future queen. Catherine was a highly educated woman. She published 2 books. The second, Lamentation of a Sinner, under her own name, the first woman ever to do so. And unexpectedly, after 4 husbands, she became pregnant, but sadly died after giving birth to a girl called Mary. As a convinced reformer, she was given the first ever Protestant funeral in English in the country. Her corpse had something of an adventure over the next 200 years, but it ended up finally in St. Mary's Chapel of Sudley Castle, in this splendid tomb designed by Sir George Gilbert Scott. A 9-day wonder, Lady Jane Grey. Jane was the great-granddaughter of Henry VII. She had a reputation of one of the most learned young women of her day and was a committed Protestant. In May 1553, she married under duress Lord Guildford Dudley, a younger son of the chief minister, John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. In June 1553, the dying Edward VI wrote his will, nominating Jane and her male heirs to the crown, because his half-sister Mary was a Roman Catholic. Jane, her father and her husband were all executed eventually by Mary, and Jane would go on to become a Protestant icon, as depicted in Fox's Book of Martyrs. Queen Mary I, Queen of England. The only daughter of Catherine of Aragon, she's best known for her vigorous attempt to reverse the Reformation in England. During her reign, she had over 280 Protestant dissenters burned at the stake, earning her the sobriquet Bloody Mary. In 1554, she married Philip of Spain in a deeply unpopular union, and despite 2 false pregnancies, she produced no heir. She died on the 17th of November 1558, possibly from uterine cancer. She was succeeded by her half-sister, Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn. One of her first actions as queen was the establishment of the Elizabethan settlement, that is, the settlement of an English Protestant church, of which she became the supreme governor. She depended heavily on a group of trusted advisers led by William Cecil, 1st Baron Burghley. Her reign oversaw a profound change in the world of literature, seafaring, and the beginnings of empire. The country was frequently threatened by continental Catholic powers, famously by the Spanish Armada, which was defeated by a combination of English harassment and stormy weather. Elizabeth didn't marry and became revered as the Virgin Queen. She is the last of the 10 queens, and it's been a delight to present them to you in this short extract. If you'd like to contact me about any of my talks, I'll be very pleased to hear from you.